because then what you're doing is you're essentially putting the Kenyan land markets on the global, for the highest bidder. That meant
Correct.
I could literally lose my ancestral home. And if you know Kenya, people budget what is called budgeted corruption.
Okay.
Right?
And explain
So
that.
You have certain line items in a budget, and a budget it's very similar to what you do when you budget at the beginning of the month for your groceries, food, etc. They have certain budget lines in the finance bill, in the now defunct finance bill, allocating money to like unconstitutional offices, allocating money to dark funds that government should use.
Undisclosed expenses that they didn't want to be.
Yeah, that they don't want us to know what this money is actually being used for.
Please give us some details of the upcoming protest at IMF HQ2 in DC, which is going to be on the 20th of Saturday, the 20th of July, which is next week Saturday. So talk to us a little bit about that before we continue.
Okay, so one of the main stakeholders in the finance bill, in fact, I'm surprised that this finance bill was not called the IMF bill. The main stakeholder in that finance bill is the IMF, because they are the ones who have pushed this so-called structural adjustment programs to the Kenya government so that they either qualify for new financing rounds, or so that they can meet their debt obligations, or so that they can conform to the global financial architecture. Kenyans have been asking questions varying from what is the IMF. It's the International Monetary Fund. It's just basically a big bank that issues concessionary and other types of loans to governments to do development work. And if you think of your own finances, the global financial architecture is designed very similarly, where you have credit ratings or credit risk around governments. So what they've basically done is they told the Kenya government that you're not meeting your debt obligations. You need to implement certain structures or certain policies for you to be able to actually raise enough money to meet your debt obligations and to be sustainable as a country. What the Ruto regime then did is that they took those instructions and went and generated this finance bill that is egregious in every way, taxing everything from consumer goods like bread to healthcare services, which is a bit unusual, like cancer treatments, life-saving cancer treatments, to sanitary towels and sanitary pads, the kind of commodities that Kenyans use on a day-to-day basis. The most egregious for me, and this is fundamental to our sovereignty as a people, were the taxes on land. Because then what you're doing is you're essentially putting the Kenyan land markets on the global, for the highest bidder. That meant
Correct.
I could literally lose my ancestral home. And if you know Kenya, people may have large parcels of land, or they might have parcels of land that they own, but they are not using them for productive use. Land does not have to be used for productive use. Some of it is culturally owned. Some of it is
it's for
trust
generations.
land.
And
For generations,
that,
a place for us to go back to. And
Yes.
back to this question about what is important for the diaspora. There is nobody you meet in the Kenyan diaspora, and we are in the millions. By last check, we were almost 3 or 4 million Kenyans in the diaspora. No one you meet who says they are not planning to go home, either to retire or once they've kind of finished their
Ali has been
rounds.
going for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this kind of programming of our finance bill by an international organization on the invitation of the president. This was not something that just happened. That doesn't happen unless someone endorses it at a very high level. There was an axis between the IMF and the president's administration to say, hey, we are going to do this to Kenyans. And the natural, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Finish.
So
Finish
our natural response to that, or this kind of punitive taxes, is to resist. And that's what Kenyans, particularly from the Gen Z, who are mostly affected by these taxes did.
But here's a quick question.
Here's
a quick question, you know, like that I think some people want to understand.
Yeah.
What's in it for the president or for the ruling administration if they accept these punitive conditions from the IMF? What's in it for them personally, to the point where they had to push it, you know, like regardless of whether people in public participation say this or that? What's actually in it for them?
Yeah, and we've been talking about this sort of from a different perspective.
Yeah.
What is called budgeted corruption.
Okay,
right?
and explain that.
You have certain line items in a budget, and a budget it's very similar to what you do when you budget at the beginning of the month for your groceries, food, etc. They have certain budget lines in the finance bill, in the now defunct finance bill, allocating money to like unconstitutional offices, allocating money to dark funds that government should use,
undisclosed expenses that they don't want to be.
Yeah, that they don't want us to know what this money is actually being used for, and then allocations that go to government departments, and then in conjunction with other legislation like what we were talking about regarding the conflict of interest bill, that these government officials can then bid for work from either government departments, state agencies, or ministries to actually siphon that money out of government, because there's the number of ways in which you can steal from government these days has reduced. One of the other things that I wanted just to quickly point out before you continue was something that was kind of said widely in the media about money not going to the right places when it's being collected. We have what is called the consolidated fund. This is basically the government's bank account. So all this money is supposed to go to one place, but then in the Kenyan government, not just at the local and or the national level, government departments have several bank account collection accounts that don't have the same level of scrutiny from the relevant government agencies. So what is in it for them? It's budgeted corruption.
So is the money that comes from the IMF, and I'm going to a very basic level, you know, so that people understand, the loans that IMF gives us, is that the money that goes towards this so-called budgeted corruption? Because I think there are people who are questioning, why are you blaming the IMF? Does the IMF give loans to Kenyans, stipulate that this money is for XYZ, or is it an open loan? You know, like just like when you go to a bank, you can either get a car loan where you specifically have to purchase a vehicle and the bank will make sure, or a home loan, or you can just get a personal loan where they just give you cash and you can go gamble in a casino.
It's not for discretionary spending. That's the development finance is never for discretionary spending. The kind of you know, I'm going to just take this money and use it to do what I want.
But does the IMF has a way of enforcing?
It does. It does, and I'll tell you why. So the structural adjustment programs are supposed to give guidelines on what they expect the government to do. Right? They're going to just loosely say, and on top of that, they also have, you know, leverage, political leverage to actually make governments use this money responsibly. But then they don't do that. Instead, they just say, hey, you know, it's, you know, some of the money is going to go into like anti-corruption, but then there's no follow-up from the powers that be to make sure that this money is not then being budgeted for corruption. Okay. So when the finance bill was written, they didn't criticize it, right? Although it had gaping holes that even our Gen Zs could see, right? They continue to kind of support that process and validate what government is doing.
Okay, and then before we come to Nomai, because I think Nomai also has a question and some comments here coming in. What is in it for the IMF? Why would you want to keep lending money to someone who you know is in a critical condition in terms of their ability to pay you back because they have a lot of debt? But what incentive does the International Monetary Fund have to want to keep pushing this money in a situation where we know, you know, like a very big part of our revenues are going towards debt payment? Because even a bank, ikiangalia credit report yako and they realize that you have a lot of debts, they will deny you a loan. So what's in it for the IMF to want to keep pushing this money?
Yeah, so think about development finance institutions. They have a limited set of clients to work with. How many countries are there in the world?
190 something. Yeah.
194.
Yeah.
Unlike a bank, you can kind of expand the number of clients you have. These development banks have a limited set of people to work with.
Yeah.
So it is in their interests to keep you in debt, to entrap a country in a debt spiral.
Okay.
Right? Because there's not going to be another East African country. There's Kenya, there's Rwanda, there's Uganda, there's Tanzania. There are no other countries, right?
Mm-hmm.
So debt entrapment is part of their modus of operation. They don't want these countries to be debt-free, because then they don't have any business. In fact, Kenyans, in their typical fashion, started saying, why don't we even set up a pay bill for us to pay these bills ourselves? That's what Gen Zs are saying. And in fact, it's not a far-fetched idea, by the way. It is not a far-fetched idea if Kenyans, went out there and said, we are going to pay this debt ourselves, because apparently the government is not making these payments on time. At the same time, if we don't pay them now, we're going to stay
the next generation. Yes,
we hand over the debt to the next generation.
To the next generation, and if there's interest, then there's exchange rates behind it, and all sorts of other things. And if you haven't met those deliverables, then there's punitive stuff that comes in. We don't know what type of agreements they have signed. There's rumors that at sometimes even there's key installments or amenities that are being signed over without you realizing that they're being signed over. Maybe it's concessions for a port. There's been all sorts of different rumors that are tied
to
this.
Rumors, it's true. They come for minerals and infrastructure that you control. We all know that they want Manda Bay. That is not a secret.
Yeah,
the US.
They want it, and they want it very bad. And those are some of the things that they will use to negotiate.
Yeah.
There are rumors about minerals in Kenya, and these are rumors that have been there for so long. Right now, people say that you cannot go to Magadi and take a picture, or even just get close to it. They will chase you away. So people are wondering,
that is true, actually.
Is salt that protected that you can't even take a picture, and it's one of the most beautiful places.
Yeah, that's where I was born. That's where I was born. Masai. That's where I was born, Magadi.
Yeah, let me just tie in with what you're saying with respect to how these loans are used to leverage national resources, right? So our country has both mineral resources. We have land. We have resources that are valuable on the open market, right? On the global market. So if you can't make your payments, and they say, the future revenues or the future export revenues from salt or from
coffee
or from the oil reserves that you have can be bonded for that purpose. This is what the IMF do. To me, it's our new form of colonization that I'm eternally grateful for Gen Zs for seeing through and protecting our sovereignty.
Okay, good. We're going to come back to the statement that the spokesperson of the IMF made about Kenya.
Yeah.
I think this was yesterday. You're going to be talking about that. And then I'm going to come